Hello, everyone. I want to talk to you today about something that many of you may have experienced or are currently struggling with, understanding English but feeling unable to speak it. It's a common issue for language learners, and the good news is that it can be solved. But first, let's break down why this happens, and then I'll share some practical tips for overcoming these challenges. One of the first things that many students realize is the difference between passive and active language skills. Let me explain what I mean by that. Passive skills involve receiving and understanding information, like when you're listening to someone speak or reading a book. You might be able to follow a conversation in English, understand the meaning of words, and even recognize grammatical structures. But when it comes to speaking, that's an entirely different skill. Speaking requires you to actively produce the language on the spot, think about the words, structure your sentences in real time, and pronounce them correctly. For example, imagine you're listening to a podcast in English. You understand every word. You know what the speaker is talking about, and you can follow the entire conversation. But when you're asked to express your own thoughts in English, you might freeze. Why does this happen? It's because understanding English and speaking it are two separate skills. To move from understanding to speaking, you need to practice speaking actively. It's like learning to play an instrument. Just because you can read music doesn't mean you can perform a piece fluently. The more you practice speaking, the easier it will become to move from passive understanding to active speaking. Now, let's talk about something else that holds many students back: lack of confidence. This is a big issue, and I've seen it so many times. You might be able to understand English perfectly, but when it's your turn to speak, you hesitate. You're afraid of making mistakes. You worry that you'll sound silly, or that others won't understand you, or that your accent will be criticized. This fear can be paralyzing even if you know the language well. For example, let's say you're in a conversation with someone and you know exactly what you want to say, but you stop yourself. You overthink, you're nervous, and then you don't speak at all. This is a normal reaction, but it's also something we can work through. The key is to embrace imperfection. No one speaks a foreign language without making mistakes. And mistakes are not something to fear. They are part of the learning process. You can't learn to speak by sitting quietly and listening to others. You have to practice speaking regularly. And the more you speak, the more your confidence will grow. Along with confidence, another reason students struggle is limited speaking practice. You may understand English well, but if you're not actually using it in conversation, you won't improve your speaking skills. For example, think about learning how to play basketball. You can read all the rules and watch videos of great players, but unless you actually get out on the court and practice shooting hoops, you won't get better. Speaking is the same way. If you spend most of your time reading, listening, or studying grammar but don't spend enough time speaking, your speaking ability will remain limited. Many students make the mistake of thinking they can improve their speaking by only focusing on grammar or vocabulary, but speaking fluently requires practice in real conversations. So, here's the solution: make speaking a part of your daily routine. Speak as often as you can, even if it's just a short sentence. You can start with simple things, like telling yourself about your day in English, practicing with a classmate, or using language exchange apps where you can talk to native speakers. Speaking regularly is the only way to develop fluency. Finally, there's one more challenge I want to address: difficulty with pronunciation and intonation. Even if you understand English perfectly and have the vocabulary and grammar down, speaking can still feel hard if your pronunciation or intonation isn't clear. For example, you might say, "I went to the park," but if your pronunciation is unclear or your intonation is flat, your message might not be fully understood. Intonation, the the rise and fall of your voice, can also make your speech sound more natural or more robotic. If your intonation is too flat, your sentences may sound less engaging. For many learners, pronunciation and intonation are the final pieces of the puzzle. It's not enough to simply know words and grammar, you also need to practice sounding natural. One of the best ways to do this is through shadowing. This is when you repeat exactly what you hear from native speakers, word for word, with the same rhythm and stress. It's like copying the melody of a song. By doing this, you can improve both your pronunciation and your intonation. Record yourself speaking and compare it with how native speakers speak. You'll notice small differences that you can work on, and over time, your pronunciation will become more accurate. So, let's recap the solutions. First, remember the difference between passive and active skills. You need to practice speaking regularly to turn understanding into fluency. Second, overcome your fear of mistakes by focusing on communication, not perfection. Speak as much as possible, and you'll naturally build confidence. Third, make sure you're getting enough speaking practice. Don't just study grammar, speak. Find ways to incorporate speaking into your daily routine. And finally, work on your pronunciation and intonation. Practice shadowing and listen closely to native speakers to improve the natural flow of your speech. The key takeaway here is this: speaking is a skill that requires consistent practice. You can't become fluent just by understanding English. You have to use it. So, I encourage you to start speaking whenever and wherever you can. It doesn't matter if it's with a classmate, a teacher, or even by yourself. The more you speak, the more confident you'll become, and the easier it will be to express yourself in English. Remember, the path to fluency isn't about being perfect, it's about using the language. So don't wait for the perfect moment. Start speaking today. Thank you.